Welcome back to Addictions class, everybody. I'm Darla, and I will follow my notes very nicely today because I made you a video and ran out of time on my disk, ran out of space on my disk. So I have a new disk in, and I will not do that again. I've set a timer. We're going to start out with our 5 deep breaths because even when we're looking at a time crunch, there's always time for mindfulness. So just remember to focus on the feeling of your breath as it goes in your body, as you hold it, as it exits your body, and just really try to keep your focus there. And if other things come up, just try to let them float by. So nice breath in. And out. And in. Out. In. And out. I did that one all through my mouth. Usually it's in through the nose, in. And out. And last one in. And out. And quite honestly, with these videos, even if I make a mistake, I just kind of keep going because I don't want you to get this idea of like, oh, if you make a mistake, it's the end of the world and you got to start over and da-da-da. Because here's the reality. Whether we're talking about this class or dealing with addictions and making changes in your life, you're going to come across days that go really well, successful things, and you're going to go through some mistakes. And then the question is, well, do you have the mistake? Acknowledge it, move on, or do you let it bring you down? We're not going to let it bring us down. So, as I said, today we are dealing with this idea of communication. Now, when you think about communication, most often what we think about is verbal communication, kind of what I'm doing with you guys now. But really, communication has both a verbal element and a nonverbal element. And it's estimated that about 10% of what gets communicated is really about the verbal message. The other 90% are all the nonverbal things. And that's why when you think about it, if you tell someone something or you show someone something, they tend to follow what you're showing them, not what you're telling them. And we all know how this, that's the old line like, do what I say and not as I do. But in reality, human beings do as you do, what they're role modeled, and not what you say. And if there's a mismatch, if someone's telling you something with their words, but it doesn't match their actions, guess what you believe more? I think most of us get this. So, and of nonverbal communication, that 90%, about 45% is visual. So it might be when people smile, is it a genuine big smile or is it that fakey kind of smile, right? So that's going to come through. Are there crinkles around the eyes? Does their body language match? Because someone might be saying, I'm going to try not to upset my little microphone thingy here. Someone might say like, I'm listening. And their nonverbals say, not really, right? Or they might say, wow, really? Right? They might like let you know through their nonverbals that they are actually listening. So visuals are a part of that. But then there's also this thing called paralanguage. Now people go, what the heck is that? Big word. But what it means is all those things about the verbal stuff and the, but it's not what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. So it's your tone, it's your pace, it's, how much your voice goes up or down, So you can say something and it can be, I went to nursing school with a woman who said dude for everything. But she might say, if she would, some days be like, oh, dude. Some days it was like, dude. Some days it was like, dude, right? So how she said it made that one word have totally different meanings. So, and when you can present things to people in multisensory ways, not just what you say, but how you say it and what your actions are, With audio messages only, like me talking to you, in 3 hours, you can probably remember about 70% of what I said if you're paying attention. In 3 days, you'll probably only remember about 10% of it if all you do is listen. If, however, you also watch the videos and, maybe engage with them a little bit, 3 hours, 72%, pretty much the same. 3 days, you're going to remember twice as much, about 20%. But if you really just hear and see and incorporate it all, maybe you even take some notes, maybe you do some repetition in your own head, those kinds of things. If you use all of your sensory things, 3 hours, you'll remember about 85%. 3 days, you will probably remember 65% of what I said, right? So people tend to remember more when your verbalizations and your behaviors and your paralanguage, so everything about your message matches. Now, nonverbals can be used to enhance or block communication. The example I like to use is when couples come into therapy, and you say, so what brought you into therapy? I used to do a lot of couples work, and they would say like, well, we just don't communicate, right? Well, I would look at them and say, wow, actually right now, you're communicating a lot, right? Their posture toward each other, their voice tone, all of that. So what they were saying really is, we don't communicate in a way that builds our relationship or gets us what we want, but they are communicating plenty. Even if you've ever been given the silent treatment, no verbals, right? Is there communication? Absolutely, absolutely. So nonverbals can enhance or block. Again, the whole I'm listening thing. With a closed posture, do whatever closed posture you want. It says I'm not listening. Or people might, they're like, no, go ahead, I'm listening. Checking their phone, right? All that kind of stuff. Doesn't match. Or they can lean into it. They can let you know with their facial expressions, with their body tone, all that kind of thing, that they're actually listening. So, dry mouth today. Now, gestures could also draw attention to certain points. One thing to remember is that a pointed finger is generally perceived as hostile. And people will often do fight or flight around that. Pointed fingers tend to get people nervous, so try to avoid that. Eye contact. Now, eye contact is interesting because eye contact can indicate interest and engagement. And it's weird with this camera because you have to look at a certain spot to have me actually seem like I'm trying to talk directly to you. And it's not the center of the camera, so it makes me a little crazy. I hope this works out on the video. But eye contact, now, in the US, we make about 60 to 80% eye contact when we're having a real conversation with someone, which means I'm going to look at you as you're talking, and every once in a while I'll look away, I'll look down. So I'm not staring at you. Go ahead. I'm listening, right? So you're making some eye contact, but you're also looking away, but you're also not avoiding eye contact. Because again, avoiding eye contact, you're like, yeah, right? We have little kids, we know they do that. Avoiding eye contact can make us look deceptive. Now, there are some cultures where it's not respectful to make direct eye contact with people. So if you're dealing with someone from a culture where that's true and you notice someone kind of looks down more, a person in a position of less authority looks down more, that wouldn't necessarily be deceptive. It would be considered respectful. So know what culture you're dealing with. But again, that eye contact thing, if you're wanting intimate conversations, eye contact is one of the biggest forms of intimacy. It says, I'm actually tuning into you. And so using that eye contact in a good way. Sunglasses, actually, it's interesting. People wear sunglasses when they're inside and having conversations. Sunglasses are often read as a sign of, definitely trying to deceive people. And if you've watched, I don't watch much World Tour of Poker, but if you watch it, a lot of people at the poker tables, if they're allowed to, will wear sunglasses. Why? Because the eyes, the face gives away a lot of subtle tells, right, about what's in their hand or whatever. And some poker players are very good at reading that off of each other. So they'll do all kinds of things. You'll see them wearing the dark glasses and they have the hat. They're just trying like, I don't want you reading my nonverbal cues. So, if you're on the World Tour of Poker, I guess you want to try to do all that stuff. But if you're trying to engage with other people in an open, honest way, you want to watch that. Posture, again, your posture can be open or closed. It can be intimidating, submissive, one up, one down. or you can show confidence or insecurity. So for instance, open posture tends to be like this, open-hearted, I'm showing my belly to you, it's that whole, the soft belly thing. I'm inviting you in, I might be leaning towards you, all those kinds of things. But a closed posture is often legs crossed, arms crossed, or hovering over someone, that position of intimidation. Some people get really submissive, like, they kind of hunch over and all that. So be aware, and people can come across as insecure or confident, right? Confident is not, that arrogant thing. Confident is just that real centered in yourself, but at the same time, you're not trying to intimidate someone else. So watch all those kinds of cues, especially with our loved ones. Now, proximity. Boy, this one's gone out the window. In the U.S., generally an arm's length is about our personal bubble, right? Our personal space is about an arm's length for people out in public or whatever. Right now, with the COVID-19, we're doing social distancing 6 feet apart, even with people that you care about, right? So out in public, if you're taking a walk or doing whatever. So the social distancing thing is going to change this. But generally, you don't want to move too close to people. If it's people you don't know, getting too close to them feels invasive. But on the same hand, if you're close to someone and you keep a large distance, that says you're kind of being disconnected. So watch that kind of thing for communication too. This comes up not just at home, but also in work situations. So watch that personal bubble. Our objects, what we surround ourselves with, what clothes we wear, communicate something about ourselves. And most of you guys get that. Most of you women get that because you've gone to court, right? You don't want to wear certain shirts or certain clothes to court because it might say something that might make the jurors think differently of you or whatever. So we all do that. I'm not saying put on a fake thing, but the thing is like, what am I projecting? And please, whatever you do, don't project like some of those wall Martians that we've all seen online, right? Where it's like, oh my Lord, they are projecting crazy. Like the stretch pants that are the same color as your skin, so it looks like you're not wearing anything because they're so tight. You see we don't want to be projecting that. Facial expression. Now, here's an interesting thing. They actually have programs where you can take a video of someone and you can, slow it down where frame by frame you can watch facial expressions. And they're called micro expressions, and they're just little changes. But here's the thing. Our limbic system, remember that's the emotional part of our brain that kind of has that ring around, and it communicates with both our brainstem and our higher level thinking brain. It is 10 times faster than our thinking brain at picking up and making some leaps into judgment on micro expressions. So those micro expressions, like I said, researchers can code them if they slow it down and, oh, look at that, look at that, look at that. But our brain, you're amazing. You're picking all that up at once, right? So that's why a lot of times we get certain feelings from people and we project certain things. And that's why you can get a feeling of unease too. People can think, they're pretty effective liars, but people kind of have this gut sense of, I don't believe that person. A lot of times it's because they're picking up on that mismatch in the emotional stuff, in those micro expressions. So they might be hearing something on one level, but what they're picking up from someone's micro expressions is, that person's being deceptive to me, right? So that's part of what that gut feeling is about. And a big part is matching, right? Is whether you're matching or not in your communication. The next part we're going to do is just some real, so those are some general communication ideas. And again, what does communication have to do with addictions? Well, you're going to be communicating with people at work, with people in your family, with people in the court system, whatever people you're interacting with. And one thing is that any kind of addiction, now we're going to use substances as the example here. Substances, because they've become a way of coping with things, often kind of slow down your development, or they block you from figuring out new solutions for how to do these basic functions like communicating. So maybe you're like, well, I used to be like dynamic in all my, in all my presentations for work, or I used to be able to, just work like a madman because maybe you're on cocaine or meth, right? But that communication is going to be way different than you showing up and trying to have your inner and outer self match and communicating in a way that really makes connections with people. And And this is often what your family will complain of, that even when dad was there, he wasn't there. Even though mom was right there with me, she wasn't there with me, right? Why? Because our insides, those emotions that we talked about, those feelings, they were being run by the addictive brain. And the addictive brain just wants to keep the addiction going. It doesn't, have that real sense of connection with people. So sometimes you're going to have to learn to communicate again. Like, wow, I got to get through this stuff without something on board, right? People are like, well, how do you expect me? Grief is a biggie. And I bet if I had you guys in front of me and I took a poll, how many of you have ever relapsed due to loss of someone? Most of you would say, yep, I've had a relapse based on that, right? I've had a relapse based on death of my family. Because that emotion comes up, you don't know how to deal with it, right? Because you don't have the drugs on board. And then you don't know how to communicate about it, tell people about it, tell people what you're going through, and take in what they're telling you. All that gets broken down. So we're breaking it down into all these skills. Like, oh, if I get to be better at communicating, I can maybe help my family out. I can deal with things that come up in my life. I can keep my job because now I communicate and I don't use other things to cover up. So getting what you want, some communication tips. First of all, if you're going to try to get what you want, keep it positive. So instead of saying what you don't like, say what you do want. So for example, instead of, how often have we heard this? You never listen to me. God, you never listen to me, right? That's what you don't want. You don't feel listened to. But you never listen to me puts the person on defensive. Instead, plus it's attacking you, never listen to me. Instead, you'd say something like, hey, you know what? When we're talking and you actually put your phone down and don't turn the TV on and you look at me, I really feel listened to, right? Or, when we're having our time to catch up at the end of the day or when we're talking with each other, would you mind shutting your computer? Because even though you say you're listening to me, I feel like I'm kind of getting half an ear, right? So does that make sense? So you're going to tell them what you do want. I would like you to shut your computer. I would like you not to look at your phone. I'd like you to have your phone not at the dinner table. All those kinds of things. Second thing is make it specific. So both you and your partner know what's being asked. Because sometimes people will say what they want and the other person fills in what they think they just heard. So you can say to someone like, let's say something general. I really need your support. I would really like your support. And the other person thinks, well, great, right? I sent them a text. I asked, hey, how's today going? They said, well, okay. And I gave a thumbs up text. Boom. I gave them my support. And the person's like, that's not support. That took 3 seconds, right? So if, for instance, you're saying you want support, I'd really like your support in this. And what that means is, could you for 10 minutes let me vent about how crappy my boss is at work, right? And I just want to vent and just let me know that you hear what I'm saying and just really be there with me, but don't give me any ideas of what to do. I just need 10 minutes of venting, right? So you give specifics. Use instead of, this is our third hint, use instead of as a lead-in. Rather than just telling, someone that you're interacting with what to stop doing, tell them what would you like instead. So here's a big one. Stop telling me what to do, Hey, instead of jumping to solve my problems about work, I'd like you just to listen for 10 minutes. That really helps me, right? Just listen. And okay, guys, you might not like this if a woman ever says it to you, but sometimes, so I've had guys say to me like, it's like she wants me to listen like one of her girlfriends. Guess what? Every once in a while, listen like her best girlfriend, meaning listen not with the job of, okay, what's the bottom line? How can we solve this? How can we get it done and just boom? Because you get into Mr. Fix-It mode, right? But sometimes people just need to be listened to. Now, guys will often say, but see, guys don't work that way. Except, I've heard guys, when they're thinking about something like they're thinking about getting a different car, they'll kind of go on and on and on about the car, right? They want to really go through what it is they love about this car, and they want people to say, oh my God, that sounds like a great car and all that. That's that same thing. You don't expect other people to go like, well, on that model, there's this problem and that problem and this problem, that. Sometimes you just want to like talk about it. So we're actually a lot more alike than people like to think. Men and women, despite what John Gray said, what was that, back in the 90s? We're not from different planets. We're from planet Earth. Yes, we have some gender differences, but most of those are just a matter of degree, not like total things. So a lot of that's been learned, and if we can realize, hey, and even if we do have a little bit different way of doing things, we can learn to speak each other's languages. And we'll do a little session that will include some of those love languages. A lot of people have read Gary Chapman's book, or at least heard about it. Turn criticisms into requests. So instead of criticizing, right? Instead of criticizing, you're going to positively state your desire, because beneath every criticism, there's a frustration or an unmet need. So instead of criticizing, if you can say, hey, what's my real desire here? So instead of, God, you never help out around the house. Wow, I'm sick of stepping over your dirty underwear. Would you please put them in the laundry, right? Something like that. And finally, sandwich the negative between two positives. So, for example, why do you always have to talk to me when I'm ready to go to bed, right? This is a frequent one. One partner wants to stay up and talk, figure things out, get it hashed out. The other wants to go to sleep. So instead, here you would sandwich it positive, your unmet desire, and the other positive. So, positive, I know what you have to say is important, and I really want to hear it. I don't take things well right before I go to bed, and then we usually end up fighting. Let's set up a time when I can really be attentive. Let's set up a time when I can pay attention to you. Hear the positive? What you have to say is important. I really do want to listen. We tend to fight if we do it before bed. I'm not very good at that time of night. There's your criticism, right? That doesn't work. And then let's set up a time where we can actually try to make this work. So, sandwich it. That's called the sandwich technique. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about was, now this is a lot of you, I hope that my books are still floating around the jail, because I haven't been there in, a couple months now. This is crazy. But I have a lot of the books out there, and some of the most popular ones are the John Gottman books, because he's so good with relationships, and also emotion coaching, parenting, and all of that. So really knows his stuff in terms of people. And there is this thing that they noticed. Successful couples, people who stayed together long-term and had satisfying relationships, not just you endured for a long term and like, man, you should get some award for, just staying in there despite the horribleness of it. But couples who really stayed together and were happy together, they found that there's what we call the golden ratio, and it's 5 to 1. Now, I wish that it was, for, every 5 bad things that go on between you, it only takes one good thing to make it all better. But of course, Murphy's Law, right? What could go wrong will go wrong. Here's the golden ratio. We talked about that in some of our videos in class. But the golden ratio is, for every one negative interaction that you have with another person, it takes 5 positives in that relationship to balance it out. 5 positives. So, here's some negative interactions that could count as that one negative. Emotionally dismissive kind of moves, right? Someone says something to you, you're like, yeah, whatever, okay, sure, right? Just dismissive. One way of being emotionally dismissive that we'll talk about another time too is this idea of turning away from a partner, which means your partner is making what we call a bid for attention. They say something to try to get your, and it might be something simple. You might be at the grocery store and they might say, hey, do we need salad dressing? And that's a kind of a bid for attention. You might go, well, that's just a question. But you might say, yeah, I think so. That would be turning towards your partner. That would be a positive interaction, which is a very small thing. But if they say, hey, do we need salad dressing? And instead you just kind of ignore them, that's actually a turning away. That counts as a negative interaction. It's like, hey, I put it out there and you just didn't even think it was worth your time to respond, right? So it's a very common one. Here's the one. Say one person's on their couch, right, engaged in TV or the computer or their phone or all 3 at the same time, and who's ever in the kitchen says, hey, dinner's ready, no response. That's a turning away. That's a negative. Then if the person says, hey, dinner's ready, and the other person says, I heard you the first time, And the person will often say, then why didn't you say anything? Because what they felt was, you didn't even acknowledge what I said. That's a turning away. So that would be a negative interaction. So emotionally dismissive and turning away behaviors. Criticism. And again, a complaint is like, hey, I hate stepping over your dirty underwear. That's legitimate. That's what we call, and we'll talk about complaints versus criticisms in another video. But that's called a complaint. I hate stepping over your dirty underwear. Would you please put it in the laundry basket? But a criticism is, you filthy pig. I can't believe you leave your dirty underwear there, you know? What are you, a poop stain? I mean, you know, you can get, it's that critical. It takes it from, here's an issue I have, that, how can we solve it, to, I'm going to criticize you. I'm going to attack who you are. Defensiveness. This one's hard because that's that reactivity. Someone says something to you, and if you're wearing, I should have my little glasses, your crap-colored lenses, I'm being nice today, your crap-colored lenses, someone says something and you get defensive right away. And you're just gonna, and then you're going to fight everything they say, and you're going to look for little holes to poke in their arguments. So that's that defensive posture. Contempt. Contempt really says, you are beneath me. And contempt says, oh, God, I don't even have to deal with you. And when I said that, oh, God, I even did the universal sign for contempt. Eye rolling is considered a universal sign of contempt because it's pretty much recognized around the world. When you roll your eyes at someone, you're not really taking them into account. You're saying you're not worthy, okay? Contempt really, really counts as a negative. So when you get into contempt, you're also getting into things that could destroy a relationship permanently. And then stonewalling. And like it sounds, stonewalling is not, I'm having a boundary for my health, that I can set a boundary, I can say no. Because remember, boundaries are meant to have doors and windows and screens and all those kinds of things in there where, you know, there's a give and take of information. Stonewalling is just, I am just going to shut you out. Brick wall. And often this happens when, if someone says something to me, if I get reactive and I get flooded, and then I just decide, well, I'm just not going to listen to a thing they have to say, and boom, that's when the stone wall goes up. And the other person feels totally shut out. And I think most of us know when we've either stonewalled someone or that feeling of being stonewalled. It kind of says you're not even worth acknowledging as a human being. So that one definitely counts as negative. So those are some of the negatives, the turning aways, the emotionally dismissive, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling. For every one of those, you're going to have 5 positives to keep this relationship in balance. Now, what are positives? First thing is turning toward. Someone says something, you respond. Even someone sneezes, you say bless you, right? Someone says thank you, you say you're welcome, right? Simple things like that. Softened startup, meaning, you know, you don't start boom with a real harsh phrase. You have a kind way of bringing things up, a kind of way of goodwill of bringing things up. You make frequent repairs. If you screw up in the middle of a conversation, you say, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. You know what? That sounded really harsh. My mind is kind of somewhere else and I just kind of snapped at you. So make those frequent repairs. Or, I'm sorry, I kind of drifted off. I'm sorry, my phone, you know, my computer just pinged and I looked at my email, right? Whatever the deal is. You make those frequent repairs. Interest and curiosity. Show an interest in what other people are doing. This turning toward, right, that we talked about. Turning toward, asking questions, doing those, you know, yeah, really? Oh, yeah, doing the empathy that we've talked about in another session. Affection, little teeny signs of affection. We're not talking affection meant to get the person in bed, right? We're talking just, but sometimes it's putting your hand on someone's arm. It's, you know, touching them in a way. It's making that little contact. It's holding their hand in public, or it's saying something, you know, with kids, we might say a pet name to them, right? You know, hey, Peanut, you know, it's that kind of thing, reaching out. And affection can also be we language, you know, and not we like, oh, we need to take out the trash. It's not that kind of thing. It's, you know, hey, we'll get through this. And, you know, we've been through some tough times and we can do hard things. And it's that spirit of goodwill. Okay? Doing small things often. Do the small things that demonstrate that that person matters to you. That means bringing up things they're interested in, even if you're not interested in it. Listen to what they're interested in. Being interested in people means sometimes putting yourself out there and being interested in things that they love for their sake. And they might do the same for you. You know, that I just read Glennon Doyle. You guys have read her books too. She said she did not want to watch the Michael Jordan special, but for her partner, she watched the Michael Jordan special that felt like 48 years long to her. But that was that thing, like, I'm still going to watch it and figure out how we can engage around it. Intentional appreciation, look for the good and praise it. Find things daily, hourly, minute by minute if you can. Small things you appreciate, look for the good in people around you and notice it. That's what we mean by praise it. Like, wow, I see you doing that. Wow, I see you doing this. Or, however, you can do it naturally too. And find opportunities for agreement, okay? Because a lot of times there's lots we have to agree on, but instead we pick out the things we disagree on and we run with those. So really find those areas for agreement. So your assignment for today, because I do want to wrap up in the time frame, and I'll pick up some other things about communication and some other segments, because we weave all these things together. Just really start noticing, how often am I negative in my communications? And how often am I positive? And can I start looking for the positives and focusing on those? And also looking for the positives in yourself. Because sometimes our inner communication with ourselves is negative, 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 negative. You stupid fool, you fill in the blank, much worse words, right? You're just picking on yourself all the time. So instead, also look for the good in what you're doing. Look for the good in the changes you're making. Look for the times that you actually step outside your comfort zone, right? How am I changing today? What am I doing well today? How am I handling cravings well today? What kinds of plans am I making today to deal with my addiction? Okay? So again, look for the good and praise it. Inside, outside, all around. I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.